You won't believe the shocking truth Michelle Obama just revealed about her life after leaving the White House. It's a story that's been buzzing with rumors for months, stories that many assumed were true without even asking the right questions. But let me tell you, there's so much more beneath the surface than what most people know. You probably thought you knew everything about Michelle Obama, the former First Lady, and her life with Barack. But trust me, this is where it gets interesting. Michelle Obama, nearly a decade after stepping out of the White House, finally opened up about her life, her real life, behind the headlines. The public eye never left her, even after Barack's presidency ended. For months, people had been whispering that her marriage to Barack was on the verge of collapse. Those rumors only grew stronger when Michelle decided to skip a few high-profile events, including Donald Trump's inauguration and the state funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. People jumped to conclusions, and the speculation reached a boiling point. Could this be a sign that things weren't as perfect as they seemed? Was the perfect political power couple unraveling behind closed doors? But here's the shocking part. Michelle's own words threw all those rumors out the window. During a candid conversation on Sophia Bush's Work in Progress podcast, Michelle spoke about a new chapter in her life that was all about her. For the first time, she said, "It's whatever I want." The woman who once lived her life in the glaring spotlight of the White House, always conscious of every move, was now in control of her own choices. Michelle wasn't just talking about picking which events to attend or deciding on what to wear. No, she was talking about the freedom to live for herself, the freedom to make decisions that weren't tied to her role as a first lady or even as a mother. This was a big deal. After decades of putting everyone else first, her husband, her children, her country, Michelle was finally allowed to take care of Michelle. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. While Michelle was celebrating this newfound independence, she also admitted something unexpected. It was scary. "It's a little scary," she said. Michelle, the confident and eloquent woman we all know, was telling us how vulnerable this new freedom made her feel. It wasn't just about choosing where to go or what to do. It was about the fear of being judged. For so long, Michelle had been held to this incredibly high standard, and now that she was making choices for herself, she worried about the public's reaction. How could she make a decision that was just for her without worrying what people might think? "I've always had an excuse. Well, I can't go there because I have to make sure my girls are okay, or I can't do this because my husband's president," Michelle explained. Those were the reasons she had used for years to justify not doing things for herself. Now, for the first time in her life, Michelle didn't have to answer to anyone. But it came at a cost. People were questioning her choices, jumping to conclusions about her marriage, and accusing her of abandoning her family. But let me tell you, this is where the story takes a surprising twist. Michelle wasn't just making choices for herself. She was taking a stand against a world that always tried to control her. When the rumors about her and Barack began to swirl, she fired back. "People couldn't even fathom that I was making a choice for myself," she said. "They had to assume that my husband and I are divorcing." It wasn't just about skipping events. It was about a society that constantly told women what they should or shouldn't do. In Michelle's case, it was the idea that she should be the dutiful wife and mother who followed the script. But what if Michelle wanted something different? What if her absence from public events wasn't a sign of trouble, but rather a sign that she was doing something radical, making a decision that was just for her? What if society's expectations were the real problem? But hold on, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. This story isn't just about Michelle pushing back against the rumors. It's about the pressure that women like her face every day. Michelle's decision to make choices for herself isn't just a personal story. It's a powerful statement about women reclaiming their power, their voice, and their right to live life on their terms. What makes this story different is that Michelle Obama, the woman who stood by her husband's side through thick and thin, was now showing the world that she had a voice too, one that couldn't be drowned out by anyone's expectations. All right, let's dive deeper into this story. We've all heard the whispers, seen the headlines, and listened to the endless speculation about Michelle and Barack Obama's marriage. Are they really okay? Is Michelle unhappy? Is it over between them? These are the questions that people couldn't stop asking. And those rumors, they didn't just start overnight. They gained steam after Michelle made some surprising decisions, like skipping Trump's inauguration and the funeral for former President Jimmy Carter. These were big moments, public events where Michelle's absence was noticed by everyone. But let me tell you, this is where it gets really interesting. Instead of letting those rumors simmer, Michelle stepped up and put it all out there. During her interview on Work in Progress podcast, Michelle didn't shy away from the elephant in the room. She knew people were talking. She knew the world was asking whether her marriage to Barack was falling apart. But here's where the twist comes in. Michelle didn't let the whispers get to her. She didn't crumble under the pressure to explain herself. No, Michelle did something unexpected. She confronted the idea head on. And what she said turned everything upside down. This is the thing that we as women struggle with, Michelle said. We get labeled for every decision we make. If we choose to live for ourselves, people assume something is wrong. In other words, it wasn't about her marriage. It was about the fact that Michelle, as a woman, had made the decision to do what was right for her. People couldn't fathom that I was making a choice for myself, she added. And honestly, that's the problem. We live in a world that's quick to judge women, especially women who are used to being in the spotlight. And when a woman like Michelle Obama, who's lived most of her life in the public eye, doesn't follow the script, well, that's when the world starts to question everything. But here's the kicker. Michelle wasn't just defending herself. She was defending the choices of every woman out there who had ever felt pressured to live up to an impossible standard. Michelle didn't need to explain herself to anyone, and that's the part people didn't understand. She didn't owe anyone an explanation for her decisions. She wasn't required to stay in the shadows of her husband's presidency or to always be the perfect first lady. Michelle was showing us all something very powerful, that it was okay to live for yourself, to make decisions that were right for you, and to stop living your life based on what other people expected of you. This wasn't just a personal battle for Michelle. It was a battle for every woman out there who's been told she isn't allowed to make decisions just for herself. But what really got people talking was how Michelle pushed back against the assumption that her marriage was in trouble. "I'm not getting a divorce. I'm just making choices for myself," Michelle firmly stated. In the public, they couldn't handle it. The whispers only grew louder, but Michelle stood strong. "If I'm not attending every event or showing up when people expect me to, it's not because my marriage is falling apart. It's because I'm making a decision that's right for me," she explained. It's incredible, isn't it? Here was Michelle Obama, a woman who had been the picture of grace and composure for so many years, suddenly pushing back against the very system that had been telling her how to behave. She wasn't just taking control of her own life. She was challenging society's narrow view of who she was supposed to be. It's like the world wanted to keep her in a box, but Michelle was breaking free. And let me tell you, that's where things got really messy for the media. They weren't prepared for this. They weren't ready for Michelle to rewrite the narrative. And still, people couldn't stop asking, why did Michelle skip Trump's inauguration? Why didn't she attend Carter's funeral? Well, let's take a closer look. Michelle didn't just choose not to attend these events. She made a statement. Remember, Donald Trump wasn't just any former political opponent. He was the man who spent years spreading false rumors about Barack's citizenship, even pushing the ridiculous birther theory. Michelle wasn't about to just stand there and act like everything was normal. She wasn't going to show up and pretend everything was fine when, in reality, the wounds from the birther conspiracy were still fresh. Michelle wasn't just skipping events for the sake of skipping them. She was making a conscious choice to stand by her principles. The world just couldn't stop talking. Every time Michelle Obama made a decision, whether it was skipping a major public event or choosing to focus on herself instead of constantly being in the public eye, rumors exploded. It was as if people couldn't fathom the idea that Michelle Obama, the woman who had stood by her husband's side through thick and thin, could just decide to live her life for herself without the weight of expectations. The media went into a frenzy and the public reacted. They didn't just want to know the truth, they wanted to gossip, speculate, and create their own version of Michelle's life. But here's where it gets even more wild. As Michelle's choices started making headlines, social media became a battleground. Some people supported her decision to step back from the spotlight. They understood that Michelle, after 8 years in the White House, was entitled to live her life on her own terms. She deserves to have her own life and make decisions for herself. She's amazing, one person wrote. These comments flooded social media, applauding Michelle for finally putting herself first. They saw this as a sign of empowerment. A woman who had spent years in the shadows of her husband's presidency, finally stepping out and living for herself. But, of course, not everyone was so kind. While some praised Michelle, others didn't hold back. They saw her absence from key events as a sign of trouble. One critical comment hit hard. Barack constantly has to apologize to her for being president. Come on, that's an honor. If he wasn't president, she might have to live a grueling life as an attorney to afford even a fraction of her current wealth. This comment reflected a harsh reality many don't want to face: the privilege that comes with being married to a former president. Some critics felt that Michelle, with her wealth and status, didn't have the right to complain or make her own decisions. They saw her absence from public life as something selfish, as though she was abandoning her responsibilities to her family, to her husband, and to her country. But let's pause for a moment. Does that really seem fair? Was Michelle's absence a sign of her disinterest in her family or her marriage? Or could it be that people were simply projecting their own judgments onto her? After all, Michelle has spent years on the world stage, always in the background, always supporting her husband. It wasn't until recently that she was able to step into the light and make decisions that were entirely her own. That's not a privilege most people get. And yet, she was still being criticized for it. That's where the story starts to take a deeper turn. Michelle's comments on social media were a reflection of a larger, ongoing conversation about women and their right to exist outside of the roles they're often forced into. For years, Michelle had been more than just a first lady. She had been the caretaker, the mother, the supportive wife who helped steer her husband's political career. But now she was carving out her own space. That's what the critics couldn't understand. It wasn't about abandoning anyone. It was about Michelle finding a balance between family, herself, and her public identity. This wasn't a simple case of Michelle giving up on her marriage. It was about a woman reclaiming her autonomy, and that, for some, was a bitter pill to swallow. But here's where it gets even more twisted. The media wasn't just focused on her absences or her decisions. They were obsessed with her relationship with Barack. Was their marriage on the rocks? Was Michelle distancing herself from her husband? Was Barack too busy with his post-presidency life to care? It was a narrative the media couldn't let go of. They couldn't imagine that Michelle was doing something entirely different. She was living her life, not as the first lady, not as Barack Obama's wife, but as Michelle, the woman who had a voice, a choice, and the right to make decisions for herself. But the media wasn't the only one scrutinizing Michelle's choices. Some of her most vocal critics came from within the political world. Meghan McCain, daughter of the late Senator John McCain and a well-known conservative commentator, didn't hold back. She suggested that the Obamas' public appearances, or lack thereof, were signs that their marriage was falling apart. She made bold statements suggesting that Michelle's decisions were symptomatic of deeper issues between her and Barack. And that's where it gets really complicated. It's one thing for the media to speculate, it's another for people with strong political ties to add fuel to the fire. Meghan McCain wasn't just commenting on Michelle's actions. She was also using the Obama's marriage as a political tool, feeding into the narrative that the Obama legacy was crumbling. What's even crazier is that some people took it even further. They accused Michelle of hiding from the public to avoid being associated with the current president, Donald Trump. Remember, during Barack Obama's presidency, Trump was one of the loudest voices spreading the baseless birther conspiracy, suggesting that Barack wasn't born in the U.S. and therefore wasn't eligible to be president. Many believe that Michelle's absence from Trump's inauguration was a silent protest against him. But that's where the story takes another unexpected turn. Michelle had always been very deliberate about where and how she showed up. She wasn't just avoiding Trump's inauguration for personal reasons. It was a symbolic stand against a man who had spent years spreading lies about her husband's citizenship. The media didn't get that. They didn't understand that Michelle's decisions weren't just about her. They were deeply tied to the personal, the political, and the larger fight for respect and dignity. So here's the question we need to ask ourselves. Was Michelle simply reacting to the media's pressure, or was she making a bold statement about who she was and what she stood for? We've heard all the rumors, seen all the criticisms, but when you dig a little deeper, it's clear that Michelle Obama wasn't just skipping events. She was taking control of her own narrative. She was making choices for herself, not for the public, not for anyone else. And in doing so, she was showing the world just how powerful it is for a woman to stand up and say, I don't owe anyone an explanation. The craziest part of this whole story, we're just scratching the surface. Michelle Obama's journey isn't just about skipping events or responding to critics. There's so much more beneath the surface that's still waiting to be uncovered. Stick around, because what happens next is truly unexpected. All right, here we are. After all the rumors, the media circus, and the nonstop speculation about Michelle and Barack Obama's marriage, the world is still left wondering what's really going on. Well, as we've already seen, Michelle has been making some bold choices lately, and she's not backing down. But here's where the story takes a twist that no one saw coming. Michelle isn't just standing up for herself. No, what she's doing is shaking the very foundation of what we think we know about her and about the role of women in the public eye. In a world where women are often expected to fit into neat, predefined boxes, whether as supportive wives, dutiful mothers, or flawless public figures, Michelle Obama is doing something revolutionary. She's refusing to be confined to any one of those roles. In fact, the more the media pushed their narrative about her marriage, the more Michelle pushed back. She wasn't going to be the obedient first lady who quietly played her part. She wasn't going to be the stereotypical wife who just followed her husband's lead. No, Michelle was doing something bold. She was rewriting the script. This is where it gets even crazier. Michelle's absence from public events, the ones that everyone thought she should attend, wasn't a sign of trouble in her marriage, but a declaration of independence. And that's what made the media panic. They didn't know how to process a woman who had been so deeply involved in the public sphere, who had dedicated so much of her life to serving her country, suddenly deciding to put herself first. But here's the twist. It wasn't just about Michelle making choices for herself. It was about sending a message to the world. She was saying, I am more than just the first lady. I am more than just Barack's wife. I am Michelle Obama, and I deserve to live on my own terms. The world had to catch up with Michelle, and that's something that's often hard for society to handle. People like Michelle, who have been in the public eye for so long, are rarely allowed to have their own lives free from the expectations and labels that others try to put on them. But Michelle wasn't playing by anyone else's rules anymore. When people said her marriage was in trouble because she didn't attend certain events, she didn't back down, she didn't apologize, instead, she pushed forward, unapologetically choosing to live for herself, to make decisions that were best for her and not for the public's approval. But there's an even deeper layer to this story. You see, Michelle's decisions weren't just personal, they were a political statement too. It's not just that she skipped Trump's inauguration or decided to take a step back from public life. It's that she was choosing when and where to engage. When Donald Trump spread lies about her husband, Michelle wasn't about to show up and pretend everything was fine. Her absence from his inauguration wasn't about being petty or disrespectful. It was a way for her to stand up against a man who had spread lies about her family. It was a statement of defiance, one that said, "You don't get to control my narrative. I control my own story." The media wanted to write a narrative about Michelle, one where her marriage was falling apart and she was running away from her responsibilities. But Michelle wasn't interested in playing into that narrative. Instead, she took the power back. She showed the world that she didn't have to explain herself to anyone. She didn't need to justify her actions or decisions. If I'm not attending a political event, it's not because of my marriage. It's because I am a woman with my own agency, my own voice, she was saying loud and clear. But here's the thing, the world wasn't ready for this new version of Michelle Obama. The world wasn't prepared for the woman who had been the epitome of grace and poise for so many years, suddenly standing up and demanding respect, not just as a first lady, but as herself. And that's why the media and the public were so quick to jump to conclusions. They didn't understand what was happening. They couldn't grasp the idea that Michelle wasn't running away from her responsibilities. She was taking control of them, making them her own. In a way, Michelle was showing the world something incredibly powerful. She was saying, I am allowed to evolve. I am allowed to change. I am allowed to choose my own path, even if it's different from what people expect. And that's the real shocker of this story. The Michelle Obama we thought we knew was just one version of her. The woman we're seeing now is someone who is much more complex, much more powerful, and much more in control of her own narrative than anyone ever realized. It's a story of empowerment. It's a story of resilience. And it's a story of a woman who refuses to be defined by anyone but herself. So what does this mean for Michelle Obama's future? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? We've only seen the beginning of this new chapter in her life. The world is still trying to catch up with Michelle, but she's already way ahead of them. She's writing her own story, and there's no telling where it will go next. But one thing is for sure, this is far from the end of the story. It's just the start of something bigger, something that will continue to challenge the world's expectations of who Michelle Obama really is. And that, my friends, is the true power of Michelle's story. It's not about marriage or politics. It's about the freedom to be yourself, to live your life, and to demand the space and respect you deserve. Michelle Obama isn't just the former First Lady. She's a woman on her own journey, and the world is watching,